When this happened, I was 26 and working as a delivery driver for a small grocery store. It was one of those side jobs I picked up while figuring out what I really wanted to do. The work wasn't hard, just long hours and a lot of driving. Most of our customers were older folks who couldn't drive or didn't want to. Sometimes we delivered late, depending on how busy the day was. That night, I was doing a last-minute delivery that came in right before closing. It had been raining on and off all evening. Not heavy, just a steady drizzle that made the roads slick and the streetlights reflect in that soft, blurry way. I didn't mind driving in the rain, actually found it kind of peaceful. The town was quiet that night too, not many cars out. I loaded the last order into the back seat and got in. The address was about 25 minutes away, mostly country roads, which meant less traffic but also fewer lights. I didn't think much of it and just put the directions into my phone. The first part of the drive was fine. There were a few houses scattered here and there, most with porch lights on. But after about 10 minutes, the houses started thinning out and it was mostly trees on either side. The rain picked up a little and my wipers started working harder to keep the windshield clear. Eventually, I reached a stretch of road that I didn't recognize. My GPS was still leading the way, but it felt a bit off. There were no more houses now, just woods and fields. Still, the road looked maintained, so I figured it was fine. I kept going, listening to the low sound of the radio and the steady sweep of the wipers. I was about 10 minutes away when I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't there before, and I couldn't tell when it showed up. It had its headlights on, but kept a good distance. I didn't think much of it until I turned off onto a smaller road and the car followed. Now, this road was more like a one-lane path. Not gravel, but close to it. I had to slow down because of the potholes and the way it curved sharply in some places. The car behind me did the same, keeping the same distance. I started getting this weird feeling. Not scared exactly, but just unsure. I've done dozens of late-night deliveries before, even in strange places, but something about this didn't feel right. I tried telling myself it was just another driver going home, maybe lived out here too. I finally reached the address. It was a small house sitting alone in a clearing, no other homes in sight. The porch light was off and there was no car in the driveway. I parked and checked the address again. It matched. I grabbed the bag of groceries and walked up to the door. I knocked and waited. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and looked around. The yard was full of trees, and the only sound was the rain. I pulled out my phone and tried calling the number on the receipt. It rang once, then stopped. No voicemail, just dead air. I stood there for a moment, feeling more unsure than before. That's when I noticed the car. It had parked at the far end of the clearing, just off the road. I didn't hear it pull up, which was strange. The headlights were off now, but I could still see the shape of it. Someone was inside. I couldn't see much, just the outline. I backed off the porch and walked quickly to my car. I got in and locked the doors, trying not to look over. The other car still hadn't moved. I sat there, unsure what to do. It didn't seem like the customer was home, and I wasn't about to walk over to a stranger's car in the dark. I decided to wait a few more minutes, hoping maybe the customer would show up or call back. But nothing happened. The rain kept falling, and the other car just sat there. No one got out, no lights came on, just silence. I started the engine and backed out slowly. As I turned around, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the other car's headlights flash on. They didn't pull out right away, but I knew they were going to follow me. Sure enough, a few seconds later they started moving. Same distance as before, not speeding, not slowing. I tried to stay calm and focused on the road. My GPS told me to go back the way I came, and I followed it exactly. Halfway down that narrow road again, I passed a small clearing and decided to try something. Pulled over and turned off my lights. I wanted to see if they'd drive past or stop too. I waited. It felt longer than it probably was, but the other car never came around the bend. I waited another minute, nothing. I turned my lights back on and kept going. When I got back to the main road, I checked behind me. Still nothing. No lights, no car. I figured maybe they turned off somewhere else, or maybe they'd just gone home. Either way, I was glad to be heading back. The rest of the drive was quiet. I made it back to the store just as they were locking up. I told my coworker that no one was home and we just marked the order as undelivered. I didn't mention the car. I wasn't sure what to even say about it. That night, when I got home, I kept thinking about it. It felt strange how they showed up out there and never left the car. It didn't seem like they were waiting for someone. It was more like they were just watching. Over the next few weeks, I drove that route a couple more times. Never saw the car again. Never got another order for that address either. I asked the manager about it, and he said the phone number on that order was disconnected now. I don't really know what to make of it. Maybe it was just some coincidence, or maybe someone out there was messing with people. Either way, it stuck with me. Not in a terrifying way, just something that lives in the back of my head. I was driving home late one night after helping a friend move some furniture. It had started raining not long after I got on the road. Not a storm or anything, just a steady, light rain that made the road slick and the windshield blurry, no matter how high I turned the wipers. It was almost midnight by the time I got onto the long stretch of highway that led back home. There weren't many other cars out, which made sense. Most people were already in for the night. The drive was quiet. The kind of quiet that starts to make you feel a little too aware of everything, like the sound of the tires over the wet road, or how the shadows shift under the trees when you pass a streetlight. I don't usually get bothered on long drives like that, but something about that night felt strange. Not scary, just off. About 20 minutes into the drive, I saw taillights ahead. They were pretty dim and hard to make out through the rain, but I could tell it was an older car. As I got closer, I realized it was going really slow, maybe 30 miles an hour, even though the limit was double that. I figured the driver might be nervous about the rain, or maybe they were having car trouble. Either way, I didn't want to stay behind them too long, so I waited for a straight stretch of road to pass. When I finally had a clear spot, I signaled and moved into the other lane. But just as I was halfway past the car, it swerved slightly, not enough to hit me, but enough to make me jerk the wheel and slow down fast. I looked in my mirror and saw that it had pulled back into its lane again, but now it was riding closer behind me. I didn't really know what to think. Maybe the driver was just having trouble staying straight on the road, but the way they were suddenly tailing me made me uneasy. I kept driving, keeping an eye on them in the mirror. They didn't back off. If anything, they stayed the same distance the whole time. I thought about pulling over to let them pass, but I didn't like the idea of stopping on a dark highway with no one else around. So I kept going, hoping they'd turn off at some point. After maybe 10 more minutes, I saw a small rest area sign up ahead. It was one of those basic ones, just a gravel lot and a couple of covered picnic tables. I figured I'd pull in and wait a bit. Maybe they'd keep going, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. As I slowed down and turned into the lot, I saw their headlights keep going on the road. That gave me some relief. I parked under one of the overhead lights and leaned back in my seat. The rain kept coming down lightly, making a soft patter on the roof. It was quiet and still, which helped settle my nerves a little. I sat there for a few minutes, just watching the rain. But then I noticed something strange in my side mirror. There was a person standing at the edge of the lot near the trees. I hadn't seen anyone when I pulled in. There hadn't been another car. I looked again, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but they were still there. Just standing. I couldn't make out much detail, just that they were tall and wearing something dark. They weren't walking toward me. Just standing like they were waiting for something. I locked the doors. After a few more seconds of watching them, I decided I wasn't going to sit there and find out what they wanted. I started the engine, backed out slowly, and drove back onto the highway. I looked in the mirror as I pulled away, but the person didn't move. They just kept standing there at the edge of the lot until I lost sight of them. Back on the road, I kept expecting to see headlights behind me again, but nothing showed up. Still, that unsettled feeling hadn't gone away. I rolled down the window a crack for some fresh air and kept my eyes forward. I just wanted to get home. Not long after, I came around a bend and saw another car on the side of the road with its hazard lights blinking. It looked like a newer car this time, and the hood was up. I slowed down. I didn't want to stop, not after the weird stuff that already happened, but I also felt guilty just driving by. So I pulled over a little ahead of the car and stayed in my vehicle while I looked back. A woman came around from the front of the car and started walking toward me. She didn't seem panicked or anything, but she wasn't smiling either, just calm. I rolled down the window a bit and asked if she needed help. She nodded. My car just died. Do you have a phone I can use? I reached for mine but saw the signal was still gone. I held it up and showed her. No service, sorry. She didn't seem surprised. Can you give me a ride to the next town then? I hesitated. I didn't like the idea of leaving someone stranded, especially in the rain, but the timing felt strange. First the slow driver, then the person in the rest area, and now this. Still, I didn't want to say no. Yeah, I said. Hop in. She got in and quietly buckled her seatbelt. I asked her where she needed to go, but she just said, anywhere with a phone. I nodded and started driving again. The next few minutes were quiet. I glanced over at her a few times, but she just looked straight ahead. Didn't say anything, didn't even seem wet from the rain. I figured maybe she'd been under the hood and didn't get too soaked. Still, there was something about her that felt odd. Not threatening, just not quite right. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe just the way the night had been going. After a while, I saw lights up ahead. Looked like a diner or a truck stop. I pointed to it and said, "You should be able to call someone from there." She didn't respond. When I pulled in and parked, I turned to tell her we were there, but the seat was empty. I froze for a second. I hadn't stopped before that moment. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't seen her move. She was just gone. I got out and looked around the lot. Nothing. Just a few parked cars and the glow from the building. I even checked the back of my van just to make sure, even though there was nowhere to hide. I walked into the diner and asked the person behind the counter if they'd seen a woman come in. They said no. I stood there for a minute, unsure of what to say next, and then just left. I drove home without stopping again. I don't know who she was or how she disappeared, but I still think about that night whenever it rains. I was driving home from my cousin's house late one night. It had been raining off and on all day, and by the time I left, it was already close to midnight. I'd offered to drop off a couple things for him earlier in the day, and we ended up hanging out longer than expected. The roads were pretty empty by then, and everything felt quiet. Just the sound of the tires on the wet pavement and the steady movement of the wipers. I wasn't really nervous or anything. I'd done drives like this before, especially when I was in college. I liked late-night drives, actually. It was calming most of the time. Just me, the road, and some quiet music in the background. The rain had started coming down a little harder, and I turned the volume down so I could focus better. I was about 30 minutes from home when I decided to take a different route. The main road had construction going on earlier in the day, and I didn't want to deal with any detours, even though it was late and probably empty. I figured the back road would be easier. It was one of those older roads that used to be a main road before they built the new highway, but now barely anyone used it. I hadn't driven it in a while, but it came back to me as I went along. The road was narrow and lined with trees, and with the rain, everything looked a little foggy. It didn't feel creepy exactly, just isolated. I passed a couple mailboxes, but didn't see any actual houses. Just trees and tall grass. I had the heat on low, the windows starting to fog a little from the inside. I cracked the driver's side window just a bit for some air and kept going. About 10 minutes in, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road. It didn't have its lights on, and it wasn't pulled over all the way like it had stopped in a hurry. I slowed down a little, just to be cautious. As I passed, I saw there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. I didn't stop, but I looked in the rearview mirror. The person wasn't doing anything, just sitting there with both hands on the wheel. I thought maybe they were waiting for a tow or just taking a break. I kept driving, but the image stayed in my head. Something about the way the car was parked didn't feel right. Still, I brushed it off. Not really my business. A few minutes later, I came around a bend and had to slow down again. There was something in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a tree branch or some trash, but as I got closer, I saw it was a bag, like a backpack, just sitting right in the middle of the road. No cars around, no sign of anyone. I stopped the car and just sat there with the hazards on, trying to decide what to do. I didn't really want to get out, but I didn't want to drive over it either. After a minute or so, I put the car in park and stepped out. The rain had lightened up a bit, but the ground was soft and muddy. I walked over to the bag and bent down to look at it. It was zipped up, but the side pocket was open. I didn't see anything inside from that angle. I looked around, expecting to maybe see someone coming out of the woods or waving me down, but nothing. It was just quiet. No other cars, no lights in the trees, nothing. I moved the bag to the side of the road and got back in the car. As soon as I put it in drive, I saw movement in my mirror. Someone was walking down the road behind me. They were still pretty far back, maybe near the bend I'd just come from. I didn't think it was the person from the parked car, but it was hard to tell in the rain. I didn't really want to wait around to find out. I started driving again, slowly at first, keeping an eye on the road and checking my mirrors. After a couple minutes, I didn't see anyone behind me anymore. I figured maybe they went back into the woods or turned around. I kept driving. The next thing that happened made me think something was seriously wrong. I came around another curve and saw the same car from earlier. Same make, same scratches on the rear bumper. Parked again on the side of the road, this time facing me. I hit the brakes and just sat there. I hadn't seen it pass me. There weren't any turnoffs or connecting roads. I didn't understand how it got in front of me. It was just sitting there, lights still off. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I waited about 30 seconds. Then I slowly drove around it, keeping my eyes on it the whole time. As I passed, I saw the driver's seat was empty. That's when I got a bad feeling, like something was off. Not scary in a movie kind of way, just wrong. I didn't stop again. I sped up a little and kept driving. I didn't see another car or person for the next 10 minutes. Just rain and trees. I was starting to relax a little, telling myself maybe it was just a coincidence or maybe someone was playing a dumb prank. The road started to open up again, with fewer trees and more open fields. I figured I'd be hitting the main road again soon. Then my low fuel light came on. I hadn't realized how low I was running. I usually filled up before long drives, but I guess I hadn't this time. I started checking my phone for nearby gas stations, but I had no signal, not even a single bar. I kept driving, hoping I'd find something soon. After a few more minutes, I saw lights ahead. Not bright ones, just a couple small porch lights. It looked like a gas station, one of those older ones that doesn't have a name, just a couple pumps and a small shop. I pulled in and parked under the overhang. It looked closed, but the lights were still on inside. I got out and tried the door. It opened. There was a little bell above the door, but nobody came out. The place was small, just a counter, some shelves, and a drink cooler. I called out a hello, but no one answered. I didn't know if I should just leave cash on the counter or wait. As I stood there, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. There were old photos on the wall, but the faces were all scratched out, every single one. The shelves were stocked, but all the items were expired, some by years. There was a noise from the back room. Not loud, just like a soft thud. I didn't wait. I left cash on the counter, enough for the gas I needed, and walked out. I started pumping gas, glancing around every few seconds. I didn't see anyone. When I was done, I got in the car and drove away. The rain had almost stopped now. The roads looked clearer. I finally got signal again about 5 minutes later and called my cousin. Told him I was on my way back and should be home soon. I never figured out what was going on with that road. The car I saw, the person walking, the bag, the gas station, it all felt like a strange dream when I thought about it later. I used to work night shifts as a delivery driver for a local courier company. We didn't just drop off small packages either. Sometimes we handled things like furniture, large equipment, or crates for small businesses that didn't want to use big shipping services. I mostly did solo drives, and they weren't usually that long, maybe a few hours out and back, but on rare occasions I'd get sent a bit further. This happened a couple of years ago when I was doing a late drop-off about 3 hours out. It had been a rainy day, and by the time I left the warehouse, the rain had picked up. It wasn't a storm or anything, just steady, quiet rain that made the roads a little slick. The route was mostly country roads after the highway, and there wasn't much traffic, just long, winding stretches with trees and empty fields. I'd driven that way before. It was quiet and kind of peaceful, especially with music playing softly and the hum of the engine. I always liked rainy nights because they made everything feel calmer. I had one delivery, just a single wooden crate for a small supply shop that didn't want it sitting overnight in their drop box. They left a key and a note telling me to leave it inside their side storage room. The first hour and a half went by without anything strange. I was on a 2-lane road by then, surrounded mostly by trees. It was dark, but the road was clear enough, and the rain didn't get worse. Every now and then I'd pass a small driveway or an old mailbox, but I never saw another car the whole time. It was the kind of quiet that starts to feel too quiet after a while, if that makes sense. About 10 minutes after I turned onto a narrower road, a shortcut I'd taken once before, I noticed something odd. I saw what looked like a light flicker through the trees on the left. Not headlights, more like someone walking with a flashlight. It wasn't steady, and I only saw it for a second before the trees covered it again. At first, I figured it was just someone checking on their property or walking a dog. Still, it caught me off guard, mostly because I hadn't seen a single house for at least 5 miles. I slowed down a bit, more curious than anything. Then, a minute later, I noticed a car up ahead, pulled slightly off the road with its driver's side door open. There weren't any lights on, no flashers, nothing. I pulled up slowly and stopped a little ways behind it. The rain made it hard to see through the back window, but the car looked empty. I didn't want to get out, not right away. It wasn't blocking the road, but something about the way it was just sitting there felt wrong. If someone had broken down, they'd usually put on their hazards or close the door to keep the inside dry. I waited a minute, watching through my windshield. Nothing moved. No one came out from the woods. No sound except the steady patter of rain on the roof of my van. Eventually, I rolled down the window and called out just in case someone was nearby. There was no answer. At that point, I thought maybe they'd gone to get help and just forgot to close the door. I put the van in park, left it running, and got out with a flashlight. The rain wasn't coming down too hard, but it was enough that I had to wipe water off the flashlight lens a couple times as I walked up. The inside of the car was clean. Empty too. No bags, no phone, no keys in the ignition. Just the seat pushed back a little like someone had been sitting there. I looked around and checked near the trees, shining the light across the ground, but didn't see anything. That's when I noticed something else. In the mud beside the car, there were footprints. Not fresh ones, but visible enough to tell someone had walked away from the driver's side, straight into the trees. They weren't running prints either. Just slow, steady steps. I counted at least 6 before the trail disappeared into the leaves and brush. It didn't sit right with me. I didn't feel scared, just uneasy. There wasn't really anything I could do, and I figured if someone was lost out there, they wouldn't hear me calling over the sound of the rain anyway. I thought about calling it in, but I didn't have service in that area, and I didn't want to stay parked there any longer. So I got back in the van and kept driving. It was only another 20 minutes to the drop-off location, and I figured I'd try calling once I got into better signal range. I dropped the crate off without a problem. The key was right where the note said it would be, and I left everything inside like they asked. I was back in the van in under 5 minutes. By then it was close to midnight. On the way back, I took a different road for most of the drive, just to avoid the spot with the car. I wasn't really shaken up, I just didn't feel like dealing with the weirdness again. But eventually, the alternate route looped back around to the same road, just a little farther down. I figured by that time maybe the car had been towed or someone had come back for it. It was still there, same position, same open door, but something was different now. There was a second car behind it. This one had its lights on. The high beams were on, actually, and they lit up the road completely. I slowed down and pulled to the side a bit, thinking someone was finally dealing with the situation. But as I passed, I noticed both cars were empty, both doors open, no one inside. I looked in the rearview mirror and kept checking as I drove away. Still, no movement, nothing at all. But I couldn't shake the thought that maybe someone had come to help and then disappeared too. About 15 minutes later, I got cell service again. I pulled over near a gas station and called the local non-emergency number. Told them what I saw, gave rough details. The guy on the line said they'd send someone to check, thanked me, and that was that. I never heard anything more. I didn't go looking it up afterward, and I never took that route again. I still drive at night sometimes, mostly local stuff now, but anytime I'm out in the rain and I see a light flicker in the trees, I think back to that night. It wasn't anything dramatic, just strange in a way I couldn't explain. And sometimes that's worse than something loud or sudden, the kind of thing that just lingers. I work late nights a few times a month. It's mostly quiet office work, cleaning up old files, handling invoices, that kind of thing. I actually don't mind it. The building is small, and I'm usually alone, so I bring snacks and listen to quiet music while I work. On this particular Friday, it had started raining pretty steadily around 6 in the evening, and by the time I wrapped up around 9, the rain was still coming down. The drive home takes about 40 minutes on a good day. I take a back road for most of it because the main highway is always packed, even late. The back road isn't really dangerous, it's just long and winding, barely any lights, mostly trees, a few scattered houses here and there. I've taken that road for years and never thought much of it. That night, I packed up my things, zipped up my coat, and made my way to the car. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was steady. I clicked on the windshield wipers and started the drive. I was already thinking about the warm food I'd heat up when I got home. About 15 minutes in, I noticed headlights behind me. Nothing strange. It's not a private road or anything. The car kept a normal distance for a while, but eventually it got closer. I slowed slightly to see if it would pass, but it didn't. It just kept following. It's not like I was scared, just a little annoyed. There was no reason to tail someone on a road that open, but whatever. I figured they'd turn off at some point. A few minutes later, they were still right behind me. Same distance. I tapped my brakes once, just a soft press, to kind of signal they were too close, but they didn't react. I glanced at the rear view again. It was a dark car. I couldn't see who was inside. The windows looked tinted, but it was hard to tell through the rain and my own wipers going back and forth. Eventually, I got to a part of the road that widened a bit near an old, empty lot. I pulled over just slightly to let them pass. They slowed down like they were going to, then they pulled over too. I sat there for a few seconds, not really sure what to do. My car was still running. The rain tapped on the roof in a steady rhythm. I looked back again, and the car behind me turned off its headlights but didn't move. I don't know what made me uncomfortable exactly. It wasn't anything obvious. I just didn't like it. I slowly pulled back onto the road. A few seconds later, their lights came back on and they started moving again. They didn't drive aggressively or anything. They just stayed behind me at the same distance. A little too close, but not enough that you could say anything for sure. I started checking my mirrors a lot more after that. About 10 minutes later, I passed a small pull-off spot where there's usually an old truck parked. Tonight, it was empty. I slowed again to see what the car behind me would do. They stayed right there. The strange thing was this road doesn't have any turnoffs for a while. If someone was just headed the same way, they'd eventually keep going. But every time I slowed down, they slowed. Every time I sped up just a bit, they matched. There's a part of the drive where the road curves sharply and goes uphill. It's one of the few places with a guardrail. As I started climbing, I noticed the car behind me slow a bit more than usual. I was glad for that. I didn't like the idea of them being too close on that stretch. But as I curved around the top and started the descent, I saw them speed up again. I don't know why it got to me the way it did. Maybe because there was no reason for anyone to be doing that, unless they were watching what I was doing. I took a deep breath and decided I'd make a turn into a side road up ahead. It's a short dead-end street that leads to a closed gate. I've turned around there before. I figured if they followed me into it, I'd know something was off for sure. I turned on my blinker and took the right. The car behind me waited a second, then followed. I slowed all the way down and pulled to the very end of the road, then made a slow U-turn. The other car didn't turn around. It just stopped in the middle of the road. I faced it now, head on. Both of our headlights lit up the street between us. The rain was steady. My wipers kept sliding back and forth. I couldn't see anyone through their windshield. It was just light against shadow. I waited a few seconds. Nothing happened. Then their headlights flicked off again. I didn't wait. I backed up as much as I could and turned my car around again. I wasn't about to sit there and find out what they were planning. As soon as I was back on the main road, I pushed the speed limit a bit. The car didn't follow immediately. But about a minute later, I saw headlights again in the distance. At this point, I felt this mix of being tired and fed up. I didn't want to call the police yet. I kept telling myself maybe it was just a strange coincidence. But the longer it went on, the harder that was to believe. I got closer to the residential stretch of the drive. It's not much, just a few houses on large pieces of land. The first one had a lit porch, which was rare. Usually people had their lights off by this time. I pulled into their driveway and parked. I didn't even get out. I just sat there, lights on. The car behind me slowed as it passed, but didn't stop this time. It kept going, real slow, until it faded from view. I waited a little longer, then backed out and continued my drive. The last part of the road is a straight shot to my neighborhood. I kept checking behind me, but I didn't see them again. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while with the engine off, just listening to the rain. I looked around the street. No strange cars, no headlights, just quiet. The next morning, I mentioned it to one of my neighbors who used to work in security. He didn't say much, just told me to always trust my gut and keep my doors locked. I've thought about it a lot since then. I still take that road sometimes, but I pay more attention now. Whoever was behind me that night didn't do anything obvious. They didn't get out, they didn't follow me home. But something about the way they moved made it clear they weren't just another driver. And I think that's what stuck with me most. It was a Friday night, and I had the house to myself for the weekend. My parents left earlier in the afternoon to visit my aunt, and I stayed behind because I had a small project to finish. The weather had been strange all day. It started raining around noon and didn't really stop, just switched between light drizzle and heavier showers every now and then. By the time it got dark, the whole house felt quieter than usual. I think the rain made it worse. There weren't any cars passing by or neighbors outside, just the steady sound of the rain and the occasional wind brushing past the windows. I wasn't really doing much, just sitting on the couch, watching a random show and eating snacks. The living room lights were off except for a dim lamp in the corner. I always liked that low, warm light when I was by myself. Made everything feel a bit calmer. Around 9, I got up to grab a drink from the kitchen. The hallway light flickered for a second when I turned it on, which caught my attention, but I didn't think too much about it. Sometimes the lights in this house act weird when it's raining a lot. I opened the fridge, poured some juice, and leaned against the counter for a bit, just listening to the rain on the roof. I was halfway back to the couch when I thought I heard something from upstairs. It wasn't loud or anything, just a soft noise, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I paused and stood still in the hallway, looking up toward the ceiling. I told myself it was just the house settling. That's what people always say, right? Still, I turned the upstairs hallway light on from the switch at the bottom of the stairs and stood there for a moment, waiting to see if anything else happened. But it stayed quiet. So I went back to the couch and tried to focus on the show again. About half an hour later, the show ended, and I figured I'd just go to bed early. I turned off the lamp and used the flashlight on my phone to walk through the dark hallway. It was strange how quiet the house felt. Even with the rain, it just felt like something was missing. Usually you'd hear creaks or the fridge humming, but everything felt still. I climbed the stairs slowly. Not because I was scared, at least I didn't think I was, but just because I didn't feel like rushing. My room is the second one down the hallway. I passed the first room, which used to be my older brother's before he moved out, and noticed the door was open. I usually kept it closed. I stopped and looked inside for a second. The window was shut, the lights were off, and nothing seemed out of place. I figured maybe I left it open earlier when I was grabbing something. I got to my room, changed into some clean clothes, and lay down on my bed. I plugged my phone into the charger and watched a couple of short videos until I felt sleepy. Just as I was about to close my eyes, I thought I heard something again. It was faint, maybe even just my imagination, but it sounded like someone walking down the hallway. I turned off the video and held my phone in my hand, staring at my bedroom door. I left it open just a little, like I always do, and I could see a bit of the hallway from where I was lying. The noise didn't come back, so I tried to relax. I kept thinking it was probably the wind pushing against the house or the floorboards shifting a little. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the front door camera, just a message saying motion detected. That made me sit up a bit. I opened the app and checked the live view. The rain was still falling, making it hard to see clearly, but I didn't notice anyone standing there. I watched for another minute before closing the app and setting the phone down. Maybe 10 minutes passed before I started to drift off again, and that's when I heard a soft knock. It wasn't at the front door. It sounded like it came from downstairs, maybe on the back door or one of the windows. It was just a single knock, not loud, just enough to catch my attention. I sat up again and listened. Nothing followed. No voices, no footsteps, nothing moving. I told myself it could have been a branch or even just something falling from the gutters. Still, I picked up my phone and checked all the camera views. Nothing at the front. Nothing at the back. The motion lights hadn't turned on either. It was getting harder to stay calm, but I didn't feel like I was in danger, just uncomfortable. I got up, walked quietly to the hallway, and looked around. I even checked my brother's room again and the bathroom. Everything was still. I decided to go downstairs and check the back door just to be sure. I took the steps one at a time, trying not to make much noise. The downstairs lights were off, but I didn't turn them on. I just used the light from my phone again. The kitchen was cold, probably from the draft near the door. I checked the lock. It was still locked tight. Same with the windows. I even looked outside through the glass, but the rain made everything outside look blurry. I stood there for a while, just looking out and thinking how weird the night had gotten. Then I turned around and started walking back toward the stairs. Right as I was about to go up, I heard another knock. This time, it came from the living room window, the one that faced the side of the house. It wasn't loud, more like someone was just testing to see if I'd hear. I froze. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared toward the dark living room. My phone was still in my hand, but I didn't even think to lift it up. I listened for what felt like a full minute. Then I took a step closer. I didn't turn on the light. I just stayed by the hallway where I could still hide if I needed to. I waited, but nothing else happened. Eventually, I backed away, walked up the stairs again, and locked my bedroom door. I turned off all the lights and sat on my bed with my phone. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even send a message. I just waited, watching the camera feeds over and over again. Around 2 a.m, I finally fell asleep with the phone still in my hand. The next morning, everything looked normal. Nothing was broken, nothing was moved, and all the doors and windows were locked. I walked around the house one more time just to make sure. When I checked the living room window from outside, I noticed something small. In the lower corner, where the rain had wiped most of the glass clean, there was a single fingerprint. Just one. I never figured out who it belonged to. Maybe it was mine from earlier in the week. maybe not. But I do remember that the knock came from higher up on the glass. So unless someone was crouching down to leave a print like that, it didn't make much sense. I didn't stay alone for a while after that. It was late. Just after midnight, when I finally got off work, the rain had been coming down hard all evening, and I wasn't exactly thrilled about the drive home. I had stayed behind a little later than usual to finish something up, and by the time I got to my car, the lot was almost empty. I drive a small, older sedan that doesn't handle rain all that well. The windshield wipers work, but when it rains this hard, they can only do so much. I got in, turned on the heat, and just sat there for a second, trying to relax. The rain made a steady noise on the roof. It wasn't calming exactly, just constant. The roads were slick, and even though the speed limit was 55, I stayed around 35 to 40. I wasn't in a rush. My drive home usually takes about 25 minutes, and I always take the same route. Long, winding roads that cut through mostly wooded areas. Not much traffic at night, sometimes none at all. About 10 minutes in, I started to feel like the rain was getting worse. The visibility dropped even more, and I had to lean a little forward to see the lines on the road clearly. My headlights hit the water sitting on the pavement, making everything shine too much. I couldn't even see the reflectors properly. It started to feel like I was driving through a tunnel made of rain. Then I noticed something up ahead. At first I thought it was just a shadow, maybe a tree moving or a piece of trash blowing across the road. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person. They were walking on the side of the road, heading in the same direction as me. They didn't have an umbrella or anything, just a dark hoodie pulled over their head and jeans soaked to the knees. They were walking slowly, not even trying to wave anyone down or look back at my car. I passed them cautiously and kept checking the rear view mirror. No car parked nearby, no house lights in the distance, just trees and rain. It didn't make sense why someone would be walking out there in this weather. I kept going, a little more alert now. A few miles later, I came around a curve and my headlights hit something again. Another person. Same kind of clothes, hood pulled over, jeans wet and clinging to their legs. This one was standing still, right at the edge of the road, almost like they were waiting for something. I slowed down and went around them, not too close. Again, no movement, no attempt to get my attention. Just standing there. I glanced at the mirror again, but they were already out of sight. For a second, I wondered if it was the same person, somehow getting ahead of me, but that didn't really make sense. I turned the radio on just for some background noise, but it didn't help much. The rain was still too loud and my nerves were up now. I kept expecting to see another person around the next bend, and I did. This time the person was standing directly in the road, not off to the side, right in the middle. I had to brake hard, tires skidding a bit on the wet pavement. I stopped about 20 feet away from them. My headlights hit their body clearly, same hoodie, same soaked jeans. They were facing me this time, just standing there, not moving, not walking closer. I couldn't see their face under the hood, but I didn't want to. My first thought was to reverse and turn around, but the road was too narrow and wet. I didn't want to end up in a ditch, so I sat there, waiting. After what felt like a full minute, they slowly walked to the side of the road. Not away, not back the way they came, just to the edge of the pavement. I kept my eyes on them as I passed, and they turned their head to watch me go. I didn't speed up. I didn't want to lose control of the car, but I wanted to get home now more than ever. The next stretch of road is the part I always liked during normal days, quiet and surrounded by tall trees. But now it felt closed in, like something could step out at any moment, and then it did. Another figure. Same clothes. This one wasn't standing though. They were crouched down, right at the center line. I swerved around them and kept driving. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. My hands were tight on the wheel now, and I realized my mouth had gone dry. I reached for my water bottle, but it was empty. That's when I noticed something else. My rearview mirror had fogged up, so I wiped it with my hand, and for a split second I saw something in my back seat. I turned fast, too fast, and saw nothing, just the shape of my jacket slung across the seat. I laughed nervously to myself, but the laugh didn't feel right. It didn't help. I just wanted to get home. The rain let up a little, enough that I could see the road better. I thought maybe the worst part was over, but I was wrong. As I came up on the last long stretch before hitting the small neighborhood roads, I saw something up ahead again. Another figure. This one was lying on the road. I thought it might be someone hurt, so I slowed down, rolling toward them with my hazards on. I stopped the car and kept my foot on the brake. They didn't move. I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't about to get out. Not after everything else. Then, very slowly, they turned their head toward me. I could just barely make out their face in the dim light. Pale. Blank. Just watching me. Then they started to get up. Not like someone struggling to stand, more like someone rising on strings. Their movements didn't look natural. I didn't wait to see the rest. I hit the gas and swerved around them. The tires skidded again but held, and I kept going. I didn't look back. When I finally reached the turnoff that led to my street, I didn't feel any relief. Not yet. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see one of them behind me somehow. But I didn't. I got home, pulled into the driveway, and sat there for a while with the engine running. I watched the rain for a bit before finally shutting everything off. When I got inside, I locked every door and made sure the windows were closed. I didn't sleep that night. I just stayed on the couch with the lights on and a blanket wrapped around me. I never saw anyone else that night. Never heard anything. Nothing showed up in the news, and none of my neighbors mentioned anything strange. But I started taking a different route home after that. One with more traffic, even if it takes longer, and I never drive during heavy rain anymore unless I absolutely have to. I work from home and live alone in a small house just outside of town. It's nothing fancy, just a cozy little place that stays quiet most of the time. I usually enjoy the peace, especially at night. There's something nice about sitting by the window, drinking tea, and listening to the rain. One night last fall, it started raining a little after dinner. Not a storm, just a light, steady rain that made everything feel slower and quieter. I had finished work early and was thinking about watching something or maybe reading for a bit. It was one of those nights where the calm almost made you feel a little sleepy, even if it wasn't that late. Around 9, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the living room window. I had the lights off except for a lamp in the corner, so the inside of the house was dim and I could see outside better. The rain was steady and the road out front was empty. No cars, no people, not even any dogs barking. I stayed there for a while, just watching the rain and scrolling through my phone. That's when I noticed something a little odd. There was a person standing across the road, just barely visible in the rain. I wouldn't have seen them at all if it weren't for the way the streetlight hit them. They were just standing still, not really moving, facing my direction. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably someone walking home or waiting for a ride. I figured they'd be gone in a minute. But they stayed there. 10 minutes went by, then 15. They didn't move. Just stood still, looking this way. It was hard to tell what they looked like because of the rain and the distance. I could only make out the shape and the way their heads seemed tilted, like they were watching something. Maybe me. I got up and walked away from the window, not because I was scared exactly, but it just felt weird to sit there while someone might be watching. I turned on the hallway light and decided I'd do something else for a while. I figured if I ignored it, the person would leave eventually. After an hour or so, I checked again. I didn't go straight to the window this time. I turned off the lamp first so it'd be easier to see outside. Then I looked. They were gone. That should have been the end of it, but something about the whole thing left me feeling a little off. I started checking the locks around the house, even though I'd already done that before bed. Everything was locked up tight, and I felt better once I double-checked. I went to bed around midnight. The rain was still falling, and it helped me fall asleep pretty quickly. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. I wasn't sure what had woken me at first. It wasn't a loud noise or anything. I just suddenly found myself awake, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, and the house felt too quiet. No wind, No creaks, nothing. I turned over and checked my phone. It was just past 3 in the morning. I thought maybe I'd go get a drink of water and then try to sleep again. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something strange right away. The air felt cooler, like a window had been left open. I walked through the house slowly, checking each room. No windows were open. Everything was still locked, but the cold didn't go away. Then I saw the footprints. They were faint but definitely there. Wet marks on the hardwood floor near the back door. I hadn't been outside, nobody had, and the back door was still locked. I stood there for a few seconds just looking at them, wondering if maybe I'd tracked something in earlier and only now noticed. But the direction of the prints was what got to me. They were coming in, not going out. I felt a tight feeling in my chest. Not fear exactly, but like I couldn't quite catch my breath for a moment. I stepped back, still staring at the wet spots, and tried to figure out what to do. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no doors creaking. The house was still silent. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, which ended up being a cast iron skillet. I didn't think I'd actually have to use it, but holding something made me feel a little better. I started checking each room again, slower this time. Bedroom, bathroom, spare room, even the closet. Nothing. No one. I turned back toward the hallway, trying to think of what else I could check. That's when I noticed the attic door was slightly open. It's one of those pull-down hatches with a little string. I never go up there. There's nothing in it except insulation and maybe a few old boxes from the previous owner. But the string was hanging lower than it should have been, like someone had just used it. I stood under it for a while, trying to listen. No sound. I didn't pull it down. I just stood there for a few minutes, then quietly backed away and went to my bedroom. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the handle, and sat on the bed with my back against the wall. I didn't sleep. I just waited until the sun started to rise. By the time it was light out, the cold in the house was gone. I opened the attic later that morning, using a broom handle to pull it down from a distance. There was nothing up there. At least, nothing I could see. I didn't climb all the way up, just enough to look around with a flashlight. The footprints were gone by then too, already dried. For a while I thought maybe I dreamed the whole thing, but I kept thinking about how cold it had been and the way those prints faced inward. That night I stayed with a friend. Didn't tell them exactly why, just said I was feeling weird about being alone. They didn't ask much. I kept living in the house after that, but I got a security camera for the front and back doors. Nothing ever showed up on them. No strange people in the rain. No more wet footprints. Still, sometimes I wake up at night and listen, wondering if something is moving around up there above the ceiling. I've never heard anything, but I still don't like going near the attic string, and I don't sit by the window when it's raining anymore. I'm 27 years old now, but this happened back when I was 22. I had just started a new delivery job that involved driving around at night, dropping off small packages to homes and businesses. It wasn't a big company, more of a local gig I found through a friend. The money wasn't great, but I liked the quiet. I'd load up the car in the evening, get a list of stops, and spend the next few hours cruising around. This night in particular, it had started raining around 9. Not heavy rain, just that kind of steady drizzle that makes the roads look shiny and makes your wipers squeak after a while. I remember thinking I should have swapped out the blades earlier that week, but of course I hadn't. The night had been uneventful up to that point. I'd made about 7 or 8 stops, all simple front door drops. Nobody came out, no one waved. It was the kind of work where you didn't talk to anyone, which suited me just fine. Around 11:30, I pulled into a long stretch of road with trees on both sides and no streetlights. My GPS showed the next stop was a house tucked down a side road off that main stretch. I almost missed the turn. The little gravel road blended into the trees, and the sign marking it was bent and half covered by a bush. I backed up slowly, turned in, and let the tires crunch over the gravel. The house was supposed to be at the very end. The road was narrow, and the rain had picked up slightly. I had to lean forward to see past the reflection of the dashboard in the windshield. After about a minute, the trees cleared out just enough to show a mailbox and a small wooden gate. I stopped the car and checked the delivery note. It said to leave the package on the porch if no one answered the door. I stepped out, keeping my hood up and the package under my jacket. The gravel was soft from the rain, and the air felt heavier than usual, like it was going to storm harder later. The gate wasn't locked, so I opened it and walked up the path. The house was small, with a front porch and one dim light glowing above the door. I knocked. No one came. After a few seconds, I knocked again. Still nothing. I figured the note was right, so I set the package down beside the door and turned to go. As I stepped off the porch, I noticed something strange. The gate was closed again. I knew I hadn't done that. I remember clearly leaving it open. It wasn't the wind either. It was too heavy to swing shut on its own, and I hadn't heard it move. I stood still for a second, then shook it off. Maybe I was just tired and had shut it without thinking. I walked back, opened the gate again, and headed to the car. When I got in, I turned the headlights on and started backing out. The rear lights lit up the trees behind me, and for just a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind one of them. Just far enough into the shadows that I couldn't make out a face, but I could see the shape of someone there. I stopped the car and stared into the mirror. Nothing moved. The rain kept sliding down the back windows, and the person, if there really had been one, wasn't visible anymore. I kept looking for a few more seconds, then figured maybe it had just been a trick of the light or the rain. I had long drives like this before, where I'd started imagining stuff. You get used to your own thoughts when you're alone too long. I kept driving. The next couple of deliveries went fine. Normal houses, porches with motion lights, nothing weird. But I couldn't shake that odd feeling. It wasn't even fear, exactly. Just a kind of pressure in my chest that felt like something was a little off, like the night was just slightly tilted out of place. My second to last stop was on another road outside of town. More woods, more gravel. I found the place without much trouble, but this time the house was set far back behind a line of old trees. I couldn't even see the house from the road, just the mailbox and a small light on a post near the driveway. I pulled in, headlights shining ahead. The driveway curved to the left, and as I turned with it, the house finally came into view. One floor, kind of worn down, with another porch. What caught my eye, though, was the car in the driveway. It looked almost exactly like mine. Same model, same color, even the same dent on the left side of the rear bumper. That was weird. I stopped my car and stared at it. I don't usually pay attention to other cars, but this one was nearly identical. I even got out and walked around the back of it. The license plate was different, though. Still, the similarity was strange. I went up to the door with the package and knocked. No answer. Just like earlier. I waited a little longer this time, then checked the instructions. Again, it said to leave the package if no one answered, so I did. I set it down and turned back toward my car. But halfway down the steps, I saw something that made me freeze. The car door on the other car, the one that looked like mine, was now open. I hadn't heard it open. I was sure it had been shut when I walked past. I didn't know what to think. I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. No movement at all. The rain had softened, but it was still falling. I got back into my car quickly and locked the doors. I sat there for a second, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe someone had been inside that car all along and just opened the door quietly. Maybe they were just as surprised to see me. But then why wouldn't they say anything? I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I turned onto the road, I looked in the mirror. That car door was shut again. I didn't go back to check. The last delivery was simple. A building near the highway, no trees, no mystery. I made the drop and headed home. It was still raining when I pulled into my apartment lot. I sat in the car for a while and letting the engine tick quietly in the background. I kept thinking about that car and the gate and that shape in the woods. I've told a few people this story since then. Some think it was just coincidence, some think I imagined most of it. I'm not really sure what to believe. All I know is I kept doing deliveries for a while after that night, but I never took jobs out on the wooded roads again. Even now, if I see a car that looks too much like mine, I get this odd feeling. Not quite fear, just a reminder that some nights don't quite make sense. This happened about 3 years ago when I was driving back home after visiting my cousin for the weekend. The whole visit had been sort of last minute, and I ended up staying later than planned. I didn't head out until almost 8 p.m., and right around the time I got on the highway, it started raining. Not a storm or anything, just that steady kind of rain that makes everything feel quiet and slow. It was going to be a 4 hour drive, and since I'd been up since early that morning, I was already starting to feel a little worn out. I figured I'd stop somewhere about halfway to grab a coffee and maybe walk around a bit to stay awake. For the first couple of hours, things were pretty uneventful. There were some stretches where I didn't see any other cars at all, just my own headlights shining on the wet pavement and trees on either side. Every now and then I'd pass a little cluster of buildings that looked like small towns, but none of them had much going on this late. Around 10:30 or so, I pulled off the highway to find a gas station. I wasn't low on fuel yet, but I wanted to fill up while I had the chance. The exit took me down a narrow road that curved a bit, and after a minute or two, I saw the glow of a small gas station sign through the rain. It wasn't one of the big name ones, just a quiet-looking place with a couple of pumps and a tiny convenience store. I pulled in and parked at one of the pumps. There weren't any other cars around, and the store inside looked empty too. The lights were on, but I didn't see anyone behind the counter. I stepped out and started fueling up, and the rain picked up just a little, making soft patterns on the car and pavement. That's when I noticed a man standing near the edge of the lot, just past the last pump. I hadn't seen him at first, which was strange because he wasn't trying to hide or anything. He was just standing there, like he was waiting for someone or maybe watching the road. He looked maybe late 40s or early 50s, had a beard, and was wearing a jacket that looked like it had seen better days. At first I figured he was just a local walking through, but then he looked over at me and started walking my way. He didn't seem aggressive or anything, but being alone out there, I tensed up a bit. He stopped a few steps away from my car and said something I didn't catch over the sound of the rain, so I asked him to repeat it. He said, "Don't keep going. Turn around and take the road back to the highway." I looked at him for a second, unsure if I'd heard him right. I asked him why, and he just shook his head and repeated himself. "Just go back. Don't drive any farther down that road." I asked him what was going on, and he didn't answer. He just looked at me for a second, then turned and walked away toward the far side of the lot, disappearing behind the building. The whole thing was strange, but I honestly didn't feel scared. More confused than anything. I figured maybe he was just someone who wasn't all there, or maybe he thought the road ahead was washed out or something. I finished fueling up, got back in my car, and just sat there for a minute thinking about what to do. I looked at the road he was talking about. It was the one that went farther away from the highway, maybe toward another little town or something. The map on my phone showed a quicker route to get home if I kept going down that way. If I went back to the highway, it would add almost 40 minutes to the trip. Still, something about the guy's tone stuck with me. He hadn't looked angry or anything, more like he was trying to warn me. I debated it for a while, and finally I decided I'd just go the long way. The rain was still coming down, and I didn't want to take chances on some unfamiliar road, especially not if someone had just warned me about it. I drove back to the highway and merged on, setting the GPS to reroute me. For the next hour or so, it was more of the same. Quiet, dark, and rainy. I kept thinking about the man at the gas station, wondering what would have happened if I'd ignored him. I tried to tell myself it was probably nothing, just some weird moment I'd forget about in a few days. But about an hour later, I saw flashing lights up ahead. Police cars, a couple ambulances, and a tow truck. I slowed down as I passed, and even though they were trying to block the view, I could see a wreck off the side of the road. A big one. 2 vehicles completely totaled, one of them upside down in a ditch. I couldn't see if anyone was inside, but the way the responders were moving around, it didn't look good. What hit me later when I checked the map again was that the wreck had happened on the exact road I would have been on if I hadn't turned around. I don't know if it would have happened at the same time I was supposed to be there, or if I would have somehow been part of it, but the timing was close, really close. Too close to brush off. It made me feel strange. Like maybe that man at the gas station knew something. Maybe he'd seen something happen before and didn't want to explain it. Or maybe it was just some weird coincidence. Either way, I've thought about it a lot since then. Now, every time I take a late drive in the rain, I can't help but remember his face. Calm, serious, just standing there quietly in the lot, telling me not to go any farther.